This video is kind of an overture, kind of a prelude. It's another build-up video, but this might be the last build-up video that I provide for the Bundes movement for a little bit, because the projects I'm working on are still in play, you know. So I won't be making content for this channel exactly like this much longer, because the real plans I have for this channel are, like I said previously, you know, more than one series getting into the various topics that are relevant for the Bundes movement. Now, I'm going to bring this to a clip from Torah Culture International. On November 12th, 2023, Rabbi David Feldman from Torah Culture International addressing a seminar on Gaza at the Muslim Community Center of Montreal. This came out on November 12th, 2023.
On va pouvoir passer donc à notre deuxième invité, with Rabbi David Feldman. Rabbi David Feldman is a spokesman for Torah Culture International, an organization founded in the 1930s in Jerusalem to protect the Jewish community from the new Zionist movement. Over the past few decades, this organization has been actively publicizing the voice of many Jewish communities around the world against the Zionist ideology. The Zionist State and its crimes committed against the Palestinian people, and they explain to the world the distinction between Judaism and Zionism, because there is a really big difference between the two terms. That the relatively new Zionist movement is a rebellion against God, and that it does not represent the Holy Torah, nor the entire Jewish community. Rabbi Feldman and his colleagues appear on many occasions at public demonstrations, university lectures, and pro-Palestinian conferences, as well as frequently giving television and radio interviews. They often fly to countries around the world, including many Arab countries. They meet with political and religious leaders and have been very successful in building bridges between the Jewish and Arab communities. Among their numerous trips, Rabbi Feldman and his colleagues have visited the besieged Gaza Strip multiple times, where they have delivered truckloads of medical aid, including an ambulance purchased with donations that they had collected. They were warmly received there, as in all other Arab countries. So I have the honor and the privilege to welcome Rabbi David Feldman on the stage.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. With the name of the Almighty, may we do and succeed. As the verse in Psalms 121 says, "My help is from Almighty God, the Creator of heaven and earth." While we are standing here during this terrible time, when this sad, criminal genocide is taking place in Gaza, so many innocent men, women, and children are being killed in a mass murder. This is something that disturbs, pains every human being, regardless whether it is our close relatives. In any case, they are our relatives in humanity. We all have families, we have kids, we have grandchildren, and we want our family to be safe. I cannot imagine having members of our family facing threat, danger, and murder. And as a Jewish rabbi, as a Jewish person, I say, it troubles us even way worse, because sadly all of this is being done supposedly in our name. And on top of this, tragically, our religion, the Jewish religion, is being misused to justify all these crimes. There is so much to speak about the falsehood of the Zionist movement, which is basically built on falsehood. But I'll concentrate on what I can help the public more than others. And I will try to explain how the Jewish religion is being misused in a terrible way and in an unjust way, unjust to God and unjust to humanity. When they show to people one side of the coin, they don't show the other side of the coin, even if some of their claims might have some truth to it. It is truly falsehood if they misrepresent the religion and the religious concepts. And let me start with one point. It's very famously being used in Zionist propaganda, the concept of the promised land. God has promised the Holy Land to the Jewish people. Now, if that's true, then don't you dare to fight God. They try to present this image as all Jews support the Zionist movement, the State of Israel. If that's the case, don't you dare to criticize. If you criticize, then you're anti-Semitic. But we have to know better than that. Yes, the promised land, the concept of the promised land is a true concept, but they only show you one side of the coin. God has promised the Holy Land to the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, according to Judaism, and this promise was fulfilled. The Jewish people were brought into the Holy Land. We believe that we were brought into the Holy Land by miracles, by the hand of God, not by our might. But the other side of the coin is very, very basics of Judaism, which unfortunately in a large scale has been forgotten today. The other side of the coin is, there are twice a verse in the Torah which says, the land should not reject you because you defile it. If people will not remain in the level of holiness God requires of them, they will be exiled from the land, expelled from the land. Unfortunately, it was several hundred years later, God have warned the Jewish people through the prophets, and these are in the books of the prophets, dozens and dozens of verses speaking about this. Unless you repent, you will be exiled from the land. Unfortunately, this is what happened. The Holy Temple, the Jewish temple, was destroyed, and the Jewish people were driven into exile. Now, all Jews, throughout all generations, without any exception, accepted the Jewish exile as a divine decree from God, and that we are required to accept it and forbidden to fight it by any physical means. We are forbidden to enter exile by any physical means. We are forbidden to return to the Holy Land in mass immigration in large numbers. Individual people are allowed, but in mass immigration it's forbidden. And we are forbidden to fight any nation. This is very, very basis of Judaism, again, accepted by all Jews throughout all generations, until the beginning of Zionism, which is almost 150 years ago, which is relatively recent, because we're talking about a 3,000 years religion, and then we have a new Zionist philosophy, a new Zionist movement, over 100 years old. This philosophy was founded by non-religious people, Theodor Herzl and his friends, people who are not only not observant of Judaism, but they were outspoken heretics, hated God and hated his religion. And these people, and only these people, could have come up with a philosophy which is so contrary the basics of Jewish belief. Now we can understand how far away, how contradictory these two concepts are. Judaism is a religion only. It's about the belief in God and the practice of His commandments. While we have a Zionist movement, which is a purely political movement, dropping the entire religion. God forbid you no longer have to follow God in order to be Jewish. You just have to support the national movement of Zionism. And this is a true tragedy to our religion. While the Jewish people are in exile, according to our religion, we are required to live in peace with our neighbors, be loyal citizens in the countries where we reside, and as I said, forbidden to fight any nation. This is how Jewish people lived for all generations. In many cases it was difficult, exile was difficult. In some cases it wasn't that bad. It happens to be that the Muslim countries, and in particular Palestine, were excellent in respecting our religion and protecting our people. How? How can Jews and Muslims live together? Nobody will believe this. But the fact of the matter was that we both believe in one God, our religions are close, and we respected each other, and we protected each other. And this is how Jewish people lived in a beautiful peace, especially in Palestine. This is basics of Judaism. Even before we see any crimes, even before any offense on other people. This concept of Jewish nationalism is totally not only forbidden, it's a total contrast of basics of Jewish belief. But when this happened in Palestine, not just by accident some crimes took place, but this was the intention of overtaking the power over the indigenous population. Unfortunately, so many people were expelled, killed, stolen their land, and so much catastrophe, and a true Nakba, which is unfortunately going on for so long. Now this is just adding so much more crimes on this criminal anti-Jewish movement to begin with. And we always say, all these crimes taking place in Palestine is not only a violation of international law, this is a true violation of Jewish law. And in no way should be these two confused together. The State of Israel in no way represents the Jewish religion and does not represent the Jewish people. Yes, you do have some people from Jewish descent who decided to create a State of Israel, to form a movement of Zionism, but in no way do they represent all Jews. Now, but Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, insists that you call the State of Israel the Jewish state. Why? Why not the State of Israel? Why not the Zionist state? They do want you to call it the Jewish state, as we started in the beginning. That if this is a Jewish state, then it's representing the Jewish people. And if you criticize it, you criticize the Jews. Then you're anti-Semitic, something that nobody wants to do. And nobody should. But it's our duty to clarify the issues. It's me as a Jewish person, and it's others in whichever community you are. We have to clarify the issues because we cannot afford the silence. We cannot afford the Zionist movement to get away with all they are doing. And people should be silenced and not speak up. People are suffering, as we see today especially. The Jewish religion is being desecrated. God's name is being unfortunately misused to all what is taking place. As human beings, as religious people, as serious human beings, we cannot allow this. it's important to realize that it's not only that Zionism and Judaism is so diametrically opposed to each other. It happens to be that masses of Jewish people worldwide oppose the movement of Zionism, oppose the state of Israel, and oppose all criminal actions they are taking all these decades, especially now. So many people are intimidated, and really, truly intimidated, as I'm sure in the Muslim community, whoever is an immigrant is certainly fearful of speaking up. But even if not, everyone is scared to speak up. In the Jewish community, the same happens. So many people will lose their jobs. In the last couple of weeks, since October 7th, 2 of our members in our organization lost 2 prestigious jobs because of this massive intimidation. People need to imagine, if we see people out there, if I was today here on the streets, this massive rally for Gaza, if we see thousands of people on the street, and these are the people coming out in public, we can imagine how many more are behind them who don't come out in public. The same happens in the Jewish community. When we see Jewish people coming out, we have to calculate how many more Jewish people are out there who share this view, who are so upset with all what's taking place. We have huge communities. I personally from New York, my colleagues are here from Montreal. We have in Montreal communities. If you very carefully try to look, you would see nice big communities with many synagogues, many institutions with no Israeli flag, no mention anything about Israel. Those people are not Zionists. They will not come out in public, but they are not Zionists, and they don't support the state of Israel. And communities like these are in many parts of the world. It happens to be that in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds, in occupied Palestine, there's a very strong anti-Zionist community, publicly active in their condemnation of the state of Israel. What happened to them? I mentioned it today in the rally. It was maybe 3 weeks ago. And you can imagine, after all this tension, after October 7th, after the state of Israel decided that whoever mentions anything about Palestine is officially criminal. If you mention anything in your social media page about Palestine, you're official a criminal. And those people came out on the streets of Jerusalem with a Palestinian flag to express their solidarity. What happened to those people? They were harassed, badly harassed. Their synagogue was vandalized. Scholars were dragged out in the middle of their studies, out on the street, and arrested. And this happens all the time. And finally, let me add one more important point, which unfortunately just works for the Zionist movement to silence people, is the concept of fear. Everybody is scared. You know, the mainstream media, the Zionist propaganda manages to place fear into the hearts of everyone. Like the Jew is afraid of the Palestinian, the Palestinian who would like to kill us all, to drive us into the sea. And then the Palestinian or the Muslim is afraid of the Jew because the Jew is that mass killer and is that Nazi. Unfortunately, that's the image that we see all the time. But we have to overcome this. It's my duty as a Jewish person. I bring back stories to my communities to explain to them that I visited the Muslim center and nobody killed me. I attended a pro-Palestinian rally. Nobody said a bad word. As was mentioned before in the introduction, I visited Gaza and I was safe. And this was after 2009, after the beginning of the siege. After that, those people were, in addition to all occupation, were even way more oppressed. And we were safe. And this is something that people need to learn, people need to see. And the same the other way around. I suggest you have to bring this message to others. We had the rabbi speaking. We had righteous people. We met them. We meet so many other people. And the Jewish people need to hear this from the Muslim community. We don't hate you. We were friends for so long. And we have to remember old history. We have to use the old history to teach us all how it's supposed to look like. This beautiful peace that did take place in Palestine should be for us a lesson. This should show us how the past was, how the future can look like, how it's supposed to look like, and how it will look like if we truly understand what's going on. If we truly want to have a better future, we have to address the root cause of all what is happening. People would think that it's because of the difference of religion we have to fight. And this is what Zionist propaganda wants us all to believe. Because if there's a difference of religion, and if those two religions will never change, and if that's the cause for the problem, then there's no solution other than fighting, continue fighting, and continue again, killing people from all sides, and God forbid, God's creation shouldn't be destroyed. And therefore, we have to understand that not the difference of religion is the problem. Despite all differences of religion, we lived in peace. Because as peoples, we can live in peace. It is the political movement of Zionism, which in the very first place came in with the agenda of oppressing another people. And unfortunately, I say this as a Jewish person, not because I condone any violence, but there's nothing else to expect, sadly, tragically, from this approach of oppressing another people. This has to stop. Certainly we have to have a ceasefire. Desperately we need a ceasefire for those oppressed people who are in dire danger every second as we speak now. We need a ceasefire, but a ceasefire is way not enough. We need a total freedom. We need a total end to this entire occupation. And at that time we can hope to see once again that beautiful peace that did exist before. And I have to conclude, we have to, all of us, in addition to all what we do, all what we speak up for Palestine, we have to pray to Almighty God for all those affected people, all those people in danger, all those souls, human beings that lost their lives, little kids, little babies. We have to pray for the peace of everything. Inshallah. Thank you.
Next up is an interview from Breakthrough News, which came out on November 1st of 2023.
We need a new system. We need a new society. We need to demand that which may have sounded impossible even a few weeks ago, but is not only realizable, but an imperative necessity. A senior United Nations official has resigned because of the Israeli assault on Gaza. In his resignation, he said, the governments of the United States, the United Kingdom, and much of Europe are wholly complicit in the horrific assault against the people of Gaza. Welcome to the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. Today, we're talking with Rania Khalek. Rania is a journalist based in the Middle East. She hosts the show Dispatches. She also co-hosts the Freedom Side Live, both of which you can find at Breakthrough News' YouTube page. You can also find her prodigious reporting on social media at Rania Khalek. Rania, welcome to the Socialist Program.
Brian, it's so good to be on with you.
I know you are talking to us from the Middle East. Of course, the eyes of the entire world, but especially the eyes of people living in Lebanon, living in Syria, living in Egypt, in Iraq, in Iran, all over the Middle East, are fixated on the horrific assault being waged by the Israeli government, paid for by the United States, against the people of Gaza. Yesterday, again, a major apartment building in a refugee camp destroyed by Israeli bombs or missiles. The image, in fact, the image of, or the footage of this atrocity is so graphic, so horrific, so disturbing that we can't actually use it. It's too much. The whole world thinks this is too much. And yet you have the Biden administration insisting, along with the Netanyahu government, that this is not the time for a ceasefire. Let's just get the perspective of people living where you are living in the Middle East.
Yeah, so I'm coming to you, Brian, from Beirut, Lebanon, and people here are just watching in horror and completely devastated. 200 miles away from me, there's a genocide being carried out by the Israelis, like you said, with the absolute complicity and, actually enthusiasm, I would say, of American and European officials who are arming the Israelis, giving them cover, the entire corporate media apparatus, running cover for genocide. I just want to, remind people who I'm sure are following all of this as well, but over 420 Palestinian children are being killed by the Israelis every single day right now. That is according to UNICEF. The Israelis, as we've all seen, are saying it out loud. You see one Israeli official after another going on television and saying they are intentionally targeting civilians, saying that there are no such things as civilians in Gaza, calling Palestinians human beasts. That was said by the Israeli defense minister, Yoav Gallant. You have Netanyahu, who announced his ground invasion a few days ago, and he referred to a Bible verse, a genocidal Bible verse, to talk about the Palestinian enemy, and basically inciting Israeli soldiers to kill infants and women and slaughter their, sheep, whatever Bible verse he was quoting. I mean, this is all on video, and at some point, I would hope would be used as evidence to try these people for committing the act of genocide. But they are crushing and destroying Gaza right now. And I say that just to note, that is what the people of Lebanon are watching on their TV screens. I know in the US, the dominant media outlets are CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, which are covering this very differently. But all of the media outlets here, whether it's, there's so many satellite television outlets for people to watch, are covering the carnage in Gaza and the horrors of Gaza. And, it's hard to focus on Lebanon when we look at what's taking place in Gaza, but a lot of that is also meant to be psychological warfare for the Lebanese population, because what you have is the Israelis officials who are first talking about crushing Gaza and there's no civilians there, and cheering for bombing refugee camps and hospitals and killing journalists and targeting the families of doctors. I mean, all of the horrific things that they're doing. They're then saying things like, Lebanon is next. We're coming for Lebanon next. We're coming for Iran next. We're going to wipe Lebanon off the map. We're going to take Lebanon back to the Stone Age. So the Lebanese population is pretty routinely used to hearing that kind of language. But with the images of Gaza, people are quite frightened here. So it's a mix of devastation and actual terror in terms of, well, what does that mean Israel's going to do to Lebanon if this war escalates? And so I want to talk about what's been happening in Lebanon. There has been a war going on in Lebanon at the border for the last 24 days. Hezbollah and Israel have been exchanging fire. But what's interesting about this exchange of fire, which hasn't received that much attention because it doesn't look like Gaza, is it's largely up to Hezbollah to make the rules. And so far, about 50 Hezbollah fighters have been killed. Every time a fighter is killed, they announce the name, the age, they show you a photo. And, meanwhile, a lot of these fighters have been killed firing precision-guided rockets at Israeli equipment on the border, particularly surveillance equipment. And Hezbollah has been releasing images of that because it's a part of a strategy on their part to take out basically what's in the north of Israel, what's considered Israel internationally, but people here called occupied Palestine, to kind of let the Israelis know, to send a message to the Israelis that if you continue to escalate in Gaza, if you continue to escalate here, we have plans. We have plans to come for you. And I just want to also note, Amnesty International recently released a report accusing the Israelis of a war crime by dropping white phosphorus on southern Lebanon. They've created massive fires and basically burned down a large portion of the bushes there as a result. And that's, probably because they see those bushes as hiding Hezbollah positions. They also have targeted journalists. They killed a journalist several weeks ago, a Reuters correspondent called Issam Abdullah, that Reporters Without Borders is saying was done deliberately, and likely was, because the Israelis knew these were journalists and where they were. They had been reporting from this position all day. They injured several others. And of course, Reuters, in its statement after its own employee, its own journalist was killed, didn't even name who killed him. And that was quite offensive. But Hezbollah did reference Issam Abdullah the next day in an operation against the Israelis, like in his honor. But just to note, yesterday Israel also killed a 20 or 16-year-old boy in South Lebanon who was riding his motorcycle home. They killed him with a drone. So if Israel has demonstrated anything the last 3 weeks, it's that it excels at killing children. But all that's to say, yes, the Israelis have, of course, killed some civilians, targeted a journalist, killed this child yesterday. But for the most part, if you look at how the Israelis used to deal with Lebanon versus today, Hezbollah has demonstrated that it has a very real deterrent capacity. The last time Hezbollah and Israel had a war, Lebanon and Israel had a war, was 2006. And while Israel, of course, killed over 1,000 people, over 1,000 civilians, Hezbollah killed over 100 Israeli soldiers, which, back then was considered a very big deal because it's not common that many Israeli soldiers are killed. And Israel failed miserably to try and invade southern Lebanon. They actually performed disastrously because they're known for being terrible at on-the-ground combat. All they can do is rely on air power. So since 2006, there have been rules of engagement where Israel is very well aware that Hezbollah has the capacity to do damage to Israel. And it's only gained in that capacity since then, especially after fighting in Syria and, getting stronger. It has like over 100,000 people in its army prepared to fight. It has far advanced weapons than it did in 2006. So there's basically a new equation that Hezbollah has installed at the border, and that is a tit-for-tat equation, where if Israel hits and escalates, if Israel hits civilians, Hezbollah can hit civilian infrastructure. If Israel hits the airport, Hezbollah can hit the airport in Tel Aviv. So because of Israel understanding that it's still dealing with a force that's not as strong as it, or doesn't have as advanced weapons as it is dealing with a very strong force that can do damage. So as a result, we have seen the Israelis refrain for 24 days to do what they would have done if this was 17 years ago. And I'll even say, Hezbollah is really in charge of this new equation. Right now, people are waiting in anticipation for Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, to give a speech on Friday, where he is expected to reintroduce this formula that I'm talking about. No one really, exactly knows what he's going to say, but it's expected that he'll reiterate this formula of tit for tat. You hit us, we can hit you right back. And so as a result of this, for the last 24 days, it's not just Hezbollah operating at the border. There's a new equation where even Palestinian factions can fire at Israel from South Lebanon, and it doesn't change the equation, whereas in the past it would have. Hezbollah can fire, and it doesn't change the equation. So it basically, like I said, whatever Israel bombs, Hezbollah, and Nasrallah has said this repeatedly in speeches over the years, whatever you bomb, we will bomb back. And so, there's been all these embassy warnings from the US. Every few days, I'll get an embassy warning. You need to leave Lebanon immediately, right? There's been all these warnings from the Europeans. And everybody here has been waiting for this war to escalate because of all these embassy warnings. And most importantly, they've been waiting for Israel to bomb the airport. Every single time Israel has escalated with Lebanon in the past, one of the first things they do is they bomb the airport. That's what they did in 2006. Right away, they bombed the airport. Well, everybody's waiting. It's been 24 days of fighting, and Israel still hasn't bombed the airport. That alone is huge, because they know if they bomb our airport, their airport will be hit back. That's not to mean they won't do it, but Israel has something new to take into account. And I'll also mention, Israel has bombed the airports in Syria several times in both Damascus and Aleppo, and that's because Syria doesn't have the deterrent capacity of Hezbollah that Lebanon has. So these rules of engagement are important because this is the first time where there is something that looks like an army in this region that Israel is actually hesitant to take on. They're very hesitant to open up a northern front with Hezbollah. And so as a result, the war that's taking place in South Lebanon has been ICE has been contained to between 5 to 15 kilometers of each border. And mostly, despite the fact that a few times Israel has targeted journalists, has targeted civilians and targeted, and of course used white phosphorus, it has mostly been a tit for tat against military installations, which is not what you see happening in Gaza. And I would say, I think the Israelis here are really trying to shock and awe the surrounding, population that isn't in Gaza with what they're doing there. And they're trying to instill this fear in the Lebanese, in the Syrians, in the Iranians. But I think that they're dealing with a very different region today that, while of course is not as strong as Israel militarily, does have the capacity to hit back. I mean, obviously Israel has superior weapons and can do more damage. But that said, you have Hezbollah in South Lebanon, like I said, tit for tat. They can do a lot of damage to Israel. And then you have Iran, which has a lot of partners across the region that, as we see, are hitting at U.S. positions in northern Iraq, are hitting at U.S. positions in Syria, where the Americans are present, unwelcome by the government there. And then you have the Houthis, also, a partner of Iran, hitting. So this is the axis of resistance that Iran and its partners across the region have been basically creating and strengthening over the past, decade. And it got stronger because of the U.S. regime change attempt in Syria. And now this axis of resistance, it does not want a war with Israel to escalate. It does not want a war with the U.S. However, watching a genocide take place in Gaza and watching their Hamas partner and other partners like Islamic Jihad and other various Palestinian factions that are involved in the fighting, watching them, take hits from the Israelis, at some point, they might not have a choice but to get involved. And so that's the big fear, is that this could snowball into a regional war that really nobody wants, but everybody's going up the escalation ladder. So it's just kind of a waiting game. And just about Lebanese feelings on the ground, I want to note there was a survey that was done, a public opinion survey by Information Internationals, the company that did it. And the results were that 76% of the Lebanese supported what Hamas did on October 7th, while 17% were neutral and 8% were opposed. And, of course, 93% of Shias and Druze, well, Druze was interesting there, were in support, 88% of Sunnis, and interestingly enough, 50% of Christians. And for those who know Lebanon, it's a very polarized country, largely polarized by sect. And, I have friends from, different ideological perspectives and different sects, and mostly everybody is horrified by what they're seeing Israel do, and their hearts are with Palestine. On the issue of Hezbollah's involvement, it's a little bit, more shaky. Most people, of course, don't want a war here. So about 48% are opposed, according to this survey, of Hezbollah's participation in this war. And then 27% are in favor. But that's also because, one last thing I'll mention about Lebanon is that, Lebanon is in a very weak position right now as a country. The state is very weak. It's been dealing with a horrible economic collapse for the last few years. So as a result, we don't have electricity all day. At some point while we're speaking, I'm sure my lights will go out and the generator will come on. And people are, their purchasing power has gone down. Obviously there's hyperinflation here. It's really difficult for those who are still being paid in local currency. And a lot of this also, what's left out of that conversation is a lot of that economic collapse is also due to the Americans and Europeans, the fact that we live in a sanctioned region where our neighbor next door, Syria, is under the Caesar sanctions, making it difficult for Lebanon to do business with its neighbor or rely on its neighbor to import products, because it might open Lebanon up to secondary sanctions. And, the fact that the U.S. sanctions Lebanon as well in various ways because of the presence of Hezbollah. And the fact that Lebanon is in extreme debt as well, and just has this very corrupt sectarian system that was put in place, by the French, of course.
Rania, let me jump in.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me jump in. I want to help frame the discussion, and I want to thank you, because you're giving the perspective from the Middle East, from Lebanon in particular, and also an assessment of the military situation. And I think it's very important for people who are mainly getting let's say people living in the United States who are not familiar with the politics of the Middle East, only getting their news mainly from the mainstream media. The entire presentation of this war, and also the presentation about Lebanon and about Hezbollah, is that there are two sides. One side is good, and the other side is evil. And the evil side are terrorists. So Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hezbollah is a terrorist organization. They are terrorist organizations because the US government has designated them as terrorist organizations. So, for instance, during the 2006 war, when the Israeli government, the Israeli Defense Forces, the Israeli military dropped cluster bombs all over Lebanon, hundreds of thousands or millions of them. These are indiscriminate weapons. They explode before they hit the surface. Pellets, fragments go everywhere. They kill whatever they hit, or they injure whatever they hit badly. So they're considered a war crime or a crime against humanity. The US just sent a whole bunch of them to Ukraine, by the way. But when the Israelis did that, the US media would say the Israelis are engaged in a war against a terrorist entity called Hezbollah. And so even though the Israeli government is using weapons that can't be characterized as anything but terrorist weapons, like cluster bombs, that designation of Israel as a terrorist entity doesn't exist in the US media. So Americans are looking at this war as like good versus evil, Israel, a state trying to defend itself against terrorists. And when you look at the track record, the designation of who's a terrorist and who's not a terrorist is completely based on your, or the US government's political, proclivities, who it wants to align with. Its allies are never terrorists and its enemies are always terrorists. And then you have the complete disregard of the killing of civilians. Matter of fact, the Biden administration and John Kirby, State Department spokesman or Pentagon spokesman, I can't remember. He's one of these agency spokesmen. Mm-hmm. He's basically saying, well, when it comes to the killing of civilians in Ukraine, that's terrible. He started to cry. He got all teary. You may have seen it. And when he was asked about all of these civilian deaths in Gaza, he was like, well, that's war. That's war. Stuff happens. So we have this narrative in the United States that it's just good versus evil. And one of the things I think that you're saying and talking about that's so important is if you don't think of this as simply a war between the great Americans and the great Israelis and the evil terrorists, but if you actually look at the issues of occupation, of course, Gaza and the West Bank and parts of Syria, Golan Heights and Egypt were all militarily seized by the Israelis in June 1967. These areas became occupied then. The Israeli government used terror tactics to seize this territory. And Gaza is still, the settlers were pulled out, but the occupation obviously of Gaza continues. So what's important here is if Americans who are trying to learn about this thing and don't think of it simply as America's great, Israel's great, the other guys are just terrorists, but actually try to understand the underlying issues of occupation, of land, of apartheid, then you start to think more importantly about the military issue. Because if you think of Hezbollah not as a terrorist organization, but a principal part of Lebanese politics and considered to be sort of heroically resistant against a foreign country, Israel occupying and killing Lebanese people, then you're looking at, well, what is Hezbollah's military capacity? Does it have the ability to actually fight? And again, for Americans, they're not thinking about this, but you in Lebanon are thinking about this, because to the extent that Hezbollah or other resistance forces become stronger, it becomes something of a deterrent for additional Israeli aggression. And I'll finish with this, Rania. You're talking about the danger of a regional war. Israel, in fact, fears a regional war because of this enhanced capacity from Hezbollah and the other resistance forces. When the Israelis thought they could do it, they wanted regional war. That was 1967. They wanted a regional war. They invaded Syria. They invaded Egypt. They invaded Jordan. This is when all of these territories became occupied. And so we're seeing a change in the relationship of forces. And again, you'll never get this from the mainstream media, everybody. Nobody's actually providing this analysis, the politics, the assessment, and also the military assessment that Rania is providing here on this program. Again, this is all important because what comes next? Does the destruction of Gaza lead to a big invasion by Israel? Does it lead to a wider war? What does a regional war look like? Not in 1967, but in 2023. The stakes here, in fact, could not be higher. Go ahead.
I know. I'm so happy you said that because sometimes I do, because I live in Lebanon, I do forget that not everybody is aware of the sort of insider nature of how all this works. But yes, I'm really glad you noted that about Hezbollah because, you know, Hezbollah emerged out of the 80s when Israel was occupying huge chunks of Lebanon. And when I say occupation, I mean they ran torture facilities and prisons. Their soldiers were on the ground here. And the reason the Israelis no longer occupy Lebanon is because of the emergence of Hezbollah, which liberated South Lebanon in 2000. That was a huge deal. After like half a century of Arabs losing land to Israel, this was the first time it was finally liberated from a settler occupying power. And after that, there was this war in 2006, and the Israelis were not able to invade. Hezbollah pushed them out and gave them a bloody nose. Hezbollah is far stronger today than it was in 2006. Hezbollah actually spent a very, very long time, years after 2011, after it entered the war in Syria in 2013, fighting ISIS and various al-Qaeda groups that were being funded and armed by the United States and its Gulf state allies to try to overthrow the Syrian government. These groups became a huge threat to Lebanon. They were actually entering Lebanon, and Hezbollah defeated them and protected Lebanon from what happened in Syria, from these groups entering and taking over areas. They actually did enter parts of Lebanon and take over the areas and threaten minority communities. I mean, there's Christian villages that were fighting alongside Hezbollah, and we're thankful to Hezbollah for saving them from these al-Qaeda groups that the U.S. was arming. And by the way, Israel also, especially in the Golan Heights, was supporting these groups on the Syrian side. You know, Israel occupies the Golan Heights, more land it stole from one of its neighbors. So you have the settler colonial power that is now faced, like you said, and this is why I think the military aspect of this is so important. I mean, what we're seeing on our social media feeds is horrific. We're seeing video after video of cut up children, of parents chaotically running through the streets, holding bags of their mutilated children's bodies, of, you know, mothers having to write their children's names on their kids' limbs in case they're killed. It's, you know, almost 4,000 dead children that we know of. So many of them babies, literally babies, being just deliberately massacred by the Israelis. But take a step back for a moment. This is the most powerful military in the region. They are nuclear armed. They have all of the best weapons constantly furnished to them by the United States of America. And they're unable to defeat a guerrilla force that is stationed inside a death camp. That says a lot. So how on earth are the Israelis, who can't even defeat Hamas, going to manage to take on Hezbollah to the north, which is a totally different ballgame, right? Hezbollah isn't in a death camp. They're in a country. They have a whole country. They have supply lines. The Israelis don't control all the borders. They can certainly put a siege on Lebanon. They still don't control all the borders. It's a very different situation, a very different terrain. And then you also have all of these groups in Iraq and Syria, and then you have Iran. And they're literally saying, there will be consequences if you continue doing this, which again is why the Israelis can't do what they did, like you mentioned, decades ago and just invade and bomb everyone. So I think it's really important to understand and recognize that, because also a lot of the carnage is meant to defeat people psychologically, is really meant to defeat people psychologically and terrify them. But you really have to look, and I mean, you even see, if you look past a lot of like the mainstream media and the way they're covering this, like I saw a headline in the Financial Times that compared Hamas to the Viet Cong, which I thought was a really honorable comparison in many ways, because the Viet Cong was quite successful in many ways, defeating a far superior power, the United States. But the point is, you know, it's really important to recognize that the Israelis aren't advancing militarily, and that they think that this can go on for months. And I'm not sure that it's going to be that simple for them. And then there's also huge regional shifts taking place that we can talk about as well.
Yeah, when I can remember as a kid when the United States was telling the people, the United States government was telling the people of the world, we had to go to war in Vietnam because the Viet Cong were terrible terrorists. Matter of fact, you can go back and get headlines. Viet Cong, that's the sort of the derogatory name for the National Liberation Front. And the U.S. was saying, well, this ragtag terrorist entity, they're terrorizing the people of South Vietnam, but we have superior weapons and we're going to destroy them. Just hang in there and we'll destroy them. And it went on. And eventually it was quite clear that there was no way the U.S. could actually defeat the Viet Cong, the National Liberation Front. U.S. soldiers, every soldier who went into South Vietnam, their main goal was to go home. Their main goal was like, my tour of duty will end in 12 months. I hope I have both legs. I hope I have both arms. I hope I can hear. I hope I have both eyes. I want to go home. And the Vietnamese fighter, the so-called terrorists, they were home. They weren't going anywhere. And so ultimately, this psychology of the war, where one side wants to go home and just end the war, and the other side wants to actually keep fighting because otherwise they live under occupation, which is what the Vietnamese were living under. So, there's a lot of unlearned lessons by empire and by arrogant governments that have the most advanced weapons, who think that weapons themselves are the determiners of military outcomes. They're the ones that determine who wins and who loses. But in wars where one side is living under occupation and the other side, soldiers actually just want to party, just go home, go to work, be with their families. They don't want to be fighting. They might enjoy the fruits of occupation, but they don't actually want to fight for it. That tilts the balance. That's a factor in the military equation. And I think that what you're saying is so important, that when we look at Gaza, people here, especially, again, uninformed Americans, that's most of us, right? Most people in the United States don't really know very much about this. And they're looking at, they say, well, there's no way Israel can lose. It's horrific what Israel's doing, but there's no way they can actually lose because they're destroying everything in Gaza. And there's no way out. There's no place to hide, so to speak. But there are tunnels, there are military forces, and it's not clear at all that the Israelis have succeeded militarily at, quote, defeating Hamas, crushing Hamas. And that's the stated goal now. The Israelis have said, we're going to fight until Hamas no longer exists. And the Biden administration, not having learned the lesson of Vietnam, is agreeing with them. Now, if the Palestinian people are living under occupation, and let's just assume for a second that you destroy Hamas, it's gone. You kill every Hamas cadre, every Hamas leader. But the people are still living under occupation. There would be another formation of resistance because people won't want to live under occupation. And I want to remind, especially the U.S. government, for instance, you said this about the Ba'athist government in Iraq in 2003. You said you're going to destroy the Ba'athist government. You're going to liquidate Saddam Hussein, going to destroy it. And the U.S. did destroy the Ba'athist government. And what happened? You had the formation of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Destroying Hamas actually would accomplish nothing because there would be some new iteration of resistance as long as occupation goes on. But the reality is they're not going to destroy Hamas. And if they actually go in and try to do militarily in Gaza, the likelihood is that Hezbollah and the other parts of the Middle East resistance will in fact enter the war. So this is the paradox, the dilemma from which neither the Israeli government, Netanyahu, or the Biden administration can really escape.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really good point you made. What is Israel's ultimate goal? I mean, they say it's to eradicate Hamas, but like you said, you can't. You can't eradicate Hamas. I mean, there's a few things to unpack there. First of all, it's an ideology, right? And it's happening as a reaction to occupation. And it's not only Hamas that's fighting. It's all the Palestinian factions. Hamas is the strongest one, but all of their military wings in Gaza are involved right now. And then who is Hamas? Are Hamas aliens that just landed in Gaza? No, they're Palestinians who are fighting occupation. They're the children of 2008 Operation Cast Lead that killed, I mean, at this point, it seems like nothing because we're reaching almost 10,000 civilians killed in Gaza at this point. But I think that killed like over 1,000 civilians and many, many, many children, like usual. Who do you think the people from 2008, what do you think they did after that? After they lost their parents and they were orphaned? They probably joined Hamas. 2014, Operation Protective Edge. These names Israel comes up with. Another 2,000 people were killed. 500 of them were children, over 500 of them. What do you think those children who were orphaned in 2014 did? You think they decided to surrender, living in a concentration camp that's now been turned into a death camp? A lot of those kids probably joined Hamas or some other Palestinian military faction. You had a war in 2021 by the Israelis on Gaza. It was a little bit shorter, but it was just as devastating as the others. What do you think is going to happen to those kids? What do you think all of these people, all these kids we see on these videos who are running around searching for their parents or hugging their dead parents, who, you know, some people are saying, what's worse, to survive or to be killed? It might be better to be killed because it's just an apocalypse in Gaza. What do you think those kids are going to do? You think they're just going to give up after they've been traumatized for life? Or might they want vengeance? Might they want liberation? Might they want freedom and now have a reason to fight even harder for it? I mean, it's just so stupid to suggest that you can eradicate Hamas. Israel, no matter how much it destroys Gaza, Hamas will still exist, which means Israel can't win. This is why, you know, you probably saw this video going around of Hillary Clinton saying a ceasefire would be a gift to Hamas, so we can't have a ceasefire. You have all of these American officials and senators and Congress people refusing to back a ceasefire because Israel can't win with a ceasefire. A ceasefire would mean a defeat for Israel. That's the parameters that Israel's laid out for itself. So militarily, there's nothing Israel can do but just kill, and eventually lose. I mean, it's not that doesn't mean that anybody really wins, but Israel cannot win. That's the position it's put itself in.
Yeah. And again, it requires from the people of the United States more knowledge, more understanding of the underlying issues, because the media spoon feeds people propaganda. Like before the Iraq first Gulf War, and I was one of the organizers of the big protests against the first Gulf War and in the second war in 2003. But parts of the American population fervently believed before the first Gulf War that Iraqi soldiers went into Kuwait City and ripped babies out of incubators, throwing these early born children who will die otherwise if they're not in incubators, just throwing them on the ground so that the Iraqis could take the incubators back to Baghdad. And so that was a deliberately planted propaganda piece by intelligence services and the Kuwaiti government, and embraced by the US government and embraced by the US media. And it was in the same loop, you know, the B-roll that people see on this show, the same loop of Iraqis took these babies and tossed them onto the floor and stole the incubators. So anybody who had a decent sort of humanitarian bone in their body would say, well, we have to strike the Iraqis because these people are monsters. And then it turned out not to be true. Well, in the case of October 7th, what happened when Hamas took the military initiative, civilians were killed. And we saw at least bodies under tarps. And the presentation was these terrorists came and they just slaughtered civilians because they're anti-Semites. The issue of occupation dropped out, the issue of apartheid. These were violent terrorist anti-Semites carrying out a pogrom against Jews, similar to what the Nazis did when the Nazis had state power in one of the biggest military machines ever, you know, between 1933 and 1945. Now, any human being who looks at a dead person who's a civilian, you're going to feel sad. If you hear about the death of a child, doesn't matter if the child is Israeli, Palestinian, just the human reaction to that image makes you feel compassion for the victim. And in the war, there are victims, and the civilians do matter. But what happened with the US media presentation was only the Israeli civilians who died mattered. And all of the death and destruction that's happening, not simply since October 7th, but has been happening for the last many decades against the Palestinian people, including mostly civilians, mostly children. There's not a Palestinian army per se. Hamas has developed a guerrilla force now, but there's no Palestinian army. So when you're at war with Palestine, you're at war basically with civilians. In Gaza, half the people are under the age of 18. That means half the population are children. So you're just inherently at war against civilians. And it doesn't matter to the American media. Like you mentioned, the civilians, the children who are dying in such large numbers. In the American media, they died. If they were Israelis, they were killed. Like that language shift actually matters for people. Like if you die, that's sad. If somebody was killed, then you have somebody to blame. But if somebody just died, there's kind of like nobody to blame. And what is Israel to do but to defend itself? So, we heard the same sort of superficial arguments, but arguments that work well within a sort of a population that doesn't have information. And again, for Americans, there is a reference point here. Like now, because of the 1960s and 70s with the progressive social justice movements, we finally had a different narrative about Christopher Columbus. We finally had a different narrative about the wars that were waged against indigenous people, the Indians in America. When I was a kid, we grew up on cowboy and Indian movies, and the Indians were always described as savages, and the cowboys were always representing, civilization. I mean, that's what's going on. The American people are being spoon-fed the same sort of cowboys and Indians narrative about what's going on in Palestine, and not recognizing that the government that speaks in their name and spends their tax dollars is actually funding an occupation that makes resistance section of them at least are, because they're getting access to alternative news, because the Palestinian and Arab and Muslim communities exist and provide a human face instead of this caricatured face of who the people of the Middle East are. Things are changing. So when you look at the big picture, you see political support from Israel is evaporating. It's not coming back. This is a sea change. The military situation inside of Gaza, as you say, they can't really prevail. They can't destroy Hamas. And then the regional allies of the Palestinian people are militarily stronger than they were 4 decades ago. So if we try to get the big picture and sort of think about where this is all going, you can kind of see that the days of apartheid are numbered. The issue, the Israeli Zionist presentation is, do you want to kill Jews or do you want to let Jews live? That's kind of the presentation. Where the other way to look at it is, do you want to have apartheid? Do you want to have an exclusivist apartheid regime? Or do you want to have a democratic regime or a democratic government where Muslim, Christian, Jew, non-believer, people, humans, part of the human family can live in a democratic society? I mean, I think the presentation here, when you put it all together, those are the two choices.
Those are the two choices. And, the longer the U.S. continues to support the Israeli government in its current form, the more difficult and bloody it's going to be to get to what you just mentioned, which is the nicer version of that. Because, one thing that I've noticed that Hamas has been doing in a lot of its statements is they're referring to Israel as a fascist state. And it's increasingly looking that way. And it's been on that trajectory. People have been warning about that for the last 20 years, that Israel has been becoming increasingly more and more extremist, fanatically far right, and I mean religious fascist far right. And, one thing that I think is incredible about the American media, I'm not surprised, but it's still incredible that they have done zero reporting on the fact that on October 7th, Israel was killing its own people. The Israelis were putting in place what looks like the Israelis were putting in place the Hannibal Directive, which is a known Israeli military directive to basically kill its soldiers rather than allow them to be taken hostage, to prevent any leverage for the other side to have in negotiating prisoner releases. So they would rather kill their own people than have them taken hostage. And this seems to have been implemented against civilians. There's Israeli civilian testimony that the Electronic Intifada has reported on and Mondoweiss has reported on, essentially saying as much. That's been, exposed in some Israeli media, where they're saying, no, our side was the one that was shooting at us. People were dying in crossfire. And none of that has been interrogated whatsoever. So when you mentioned the Kuwait, the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter lying in front of Congress about babies in incubators to justify the first Gulf War in the early 90s, you're hearing a lot of crazy, unsubstantiated, evidence-free claims about what happened on October 7th. Meanwhile, Palestinians are questioned for dying. Where you have Biden and John Kirby literally getting up in front of cameras and mocking Palestinians, saying, we can't trust your death toll. It's disgusting and it's racist. And it's just completely, and people aren't going to forget this. Arabs and Muslims in America are not going to forget this when it comes to decide who to vote for next year. And I'm shocked that Joe Biden is going to self-destruct the way he is to back Israel's genocide in Gaza. But then the question becomes why, right? Why be so enthusiastic for this disgusting, horrific, genocidal onslaught in Gaza? And there's a lot of reasons. I don't think there's one. There's the fact that Israel is the sort of sphere of imperialism in the Middle East. It polices the Middle East for the Americans and the Europeans. That's one. You have this massive lobbying apparatus in the U.S. when it comes to the way that politics works that we're very well aware of. That's another one. You could come up with all kinds of reasons. There's also an actual affinity by a certain generation of American politicians for the state of Israel as well. I think that, that the sort of boomers in the American government really do believe Israel's a perfect, wonderful, moral state that's a light of civilization. But, if you also think about what happened on October 7th, it really shook the world. It's changed the world. This is a real turning point in history, because what you had was a group of indigenous people carrying out just in military terms, carrying out a pretty successful military operation against their settler colonial occupier. And if you're Joe Biden or Ursula von der Leyen or Justin Trudeau or Emmanuel Macron, and you're a leader in one of these either European, imperialist countries or the sort of settler colonies of Europe, Australia, America, Canada, whatever. If you're one of these people, that's scary. That's really scary. You have a bunch of indigenous brown people shooting at the garden. You have the jungle people, Brian, shot at the garden. And they exacted a lot of casualties when they shot at the garden. And that can't be tolerated. That cannot be tolerated. So in a way, you have the imperialists responding by crushing Gaza as a part of this genocidal fantasy they have against the global South, but also I think to send a message to people in the global South. This is what happens to you if you fight back against our rotten, colonial, imperialist, capitalist system that's in decay right now. This is a performance, I think, for the rest of the global South, a literal vengeance exacted against people who got in the way of the settler colonial, European project in the Middle East. It got in the way of Ursula von der Leyen and Joe Biden's plans for Saudi normalization, got in the way against their Russian gas deal, to try to, or trying to replace Russian gas with other gas, using Israel's gas, for example. This is really like a warning also, I think, not just to the people of the global south, but look what they're doing to their own populations in these countries. The repressive measures being put in place in Germany to ban protests, talking about banning the Palestinian flag in the UK, the entire UK corporate media apparatus referring to pro-Palestine protests, even led by Jews, as pro-Hamas and anti-Semitic. What you have happening in France as well, you see protesters like being beaten and rallies being banned. And then in the US, you have this resolution, or I'm not sure, bill before Congress, trying to basically justify surveilling pro-Palestinian campus groups under the guise of the material support for terrorism clause that the US uses to spy on people and to repress activity. I mean, that's a serious thing, to be accusing college students of material support for terrorism. So why do they have to do this? They have to do this because they've lost the narrative war in their own countries. So you see these repressive measures being enforced internally as well. I really think, Brian, that this speaks to a serious decay inside, the capitalist system in the global north. And it's almost like the scale of October 7th and what it meant was so big. It requires a genocide to try to overturn it.
Well, very important points, Rania. The Palestinian people in Gaza engaged in nonviolent protests in 2018. Every Friday, they went to the wall where the Israelis won't let people from Gaza leave. They had what was called the Great March of Return. So they had nonviolent protests, and the Israeli snipers shot and killed hundreds of people, thousands of people, but killed hundreds, killed journalists, killed medics, deliberate targeting of individuals, people who clearly had Red Cross or Red Crescent symbolism on their body so that they would be seen as medics, or people who had press credentials prominently displayed. They were shot and killed. So the Israelis made nonviolent protest basically impossible, because if you go every week to the wall and have a peaceful protest and you get shot down, eventually people are going to stop doing that. And when a government shuts down the road for peaceful nonviolent protest, it makes armed resistance basically inevitable. In many ways, the United States having the First Amendment, it's kind of a safety valve to make sure that armed struggle groups don't form. And of course, the First Amendment is always being attacked, even by people in the establishment who say they love it and like it and makes America great. But that said, that's what happened to the Palestinians. They tried nonviolent, peaceful means. Now, let's go back to the point you're making about Americans who are engaged in solidarity. In maybe half the states of the country, it's illegal to support the boycott, divest, and sanctions movement for Israel, meaning don't do to Israel, to the apartheid government in Israel, what the worldwide progressive social justice movement did to the South African racist fascist apartheid regime in South Africa in the 80s. Boycott, divest, and sanction. Don't buy stuff from them. Isolate them economically. And half the states in the country have laws which makes it illegal. Abby Martin, filmmaker, journalist, our friend, had her conference speech canceled in Georgia because she refused to sign a thing saying, I will not boycott, divest, or advocate boycott, divestment, and sanctions of Israel. She sued them. But this is half the states in the country. And the legislators who are writing these laws, making it illegal to protest peacefully against Israel, they're being joined by officials from the Israeli government who sit with them and help write the laws for like state legislatures. So if you make protest impossible in Gaza, if you criminalize dissent in the United States, then obviously, the whole issue of how do you get justice includes the issue, in the case of Gaza, of possible armed struggle. That's what October 7th was, an expression of that. And then once the armed struggle starts, the focus is on the people who engaged in armed struggle. You characterize them, demonize them as only terrorists. They're evil and they're fighting good. So then the whole process of how this came to be, October 7th came to be, is ignored. So you're making the point that October 7th in some ways is a turning point, which doesn't mean we're celebrating killing civilians. On the contrary, who isn't horrified by the death of civilians? But if it is in fact objectively a turning point, then what happens next matters. We have a clear signal from the Israeli government and from the Biden administration about what they think the next thing should be. And it should be endless, intensifying criminal war against the people of Gaza. That's their message. Joe Biden is on record saying, no, this isn't the time for a ceasefire. The Israelis have rejected a ceasefire. They've called it a despicable act by those in the UN who advocated for a ceasefire. Biden obviously doesn't want a ceasefire in Ukraine either. You know, if that's your message to the people of the United States and the people of the world, our message is no ceasefire. Our solution is no ceasefire. Keep fighting. Keep the bombs coming. And by the way, the military contractors, their stocks are going through the roof. They're very happy. I was reading some of the messages from CEOs of weapons manufacturers to their investors. They're saying, well, they use kind of euphemistic language, but they're basically so happy about what's going on because they're going to be more arms shipments, more profits for them. It's good business. And I say to the people of the world and people in the United States, and of course, a very big part of the Jewish community is now on record out in the streets having militant protests demanding a ceasefire, saying Biden doesn't speak for us. He doesn't speak for this part of the Jewish community. When you look at the whole program of Biden and the Israelis, that's not a program that people of the world want. They don't want endless war. They want the ceasefire. But more than the ceasefire, they want justice. They want the underlying cause of the conflict, the thing that started October 7th, to be remedied. And the only remedy is to end occupation and to end apartheid. The problem of war isn't simply the absence of peace, it's the absence of justice. Because the absence of justice makes conflict almost inevitable. With all that said, Rania, I'm going to give you the last word. Again, here in the U.S., we're on the eve of the biggest protest, November 4th, in history for Palestine. And the protests have been going on every day in every city. But we have entered, as you put it, a new period. And it's up to us, the people of the world, not just the people in Gaza, but us. What do we do? What kind of a difference can we make to lead, to find a path that takes us to justice?
Yeah, I'm so happy that there's so many people who plan to be attending November 4th. I hope anybody who can get there gets there. It's so important for these governments in these supposedly Western democratic countries to see that internally people do not want this. And polls show it. Polls show exactly what you're saying. The majority of Americans want to see a ceasefire. Joe Biden is completely out of step, not just with the majority of Americans, but also like the overwhelming majority of his own party. And I would also add, this is reaching incredibly dangerous territory, if it wasn't already dangerous enough, right? You have Gaza just being completely relentlessly crushed and destroyed with genocidal, fanatical Israeli government officials telling us exactly what they want to do there, and they're doing it. And that's going to continue if we don't stop this. Moreover, this is going to escalate across the region if this isn't stopped. This is going to escalate to Lebanon. It's going to escalate to Syria, which is already dealing with so much. It's going to escalate to Iraq. It's going to escalate. It's going to reverberate in a very disastrous, catastrophic way across this region. It is going to light the Middle East on fire. It's going to cause a regional destructive war that really, I think, will be more dangerous than what we see in Ukraine because of of how much it can snowball into catastrophe. And you will see the Americans be forced to get further and further involved. We already have several aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean coming to show force against Iran and to resupply the Israelis. You already have America sending more troops to the region. This is a scary, dangerous moment. We need to put a stop to what's happening in Gaza to prevent the entire region from exploding.
Rania Khalek, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian.
Without Donna Newman prepping me, I have to figure out a lot of this really just on my own. I mean, not that I hadn't made videos before on my own, but like presentation is something I have to work on. But in retrospect, she wasn't really good at presentation. That isn't to say that some of her direction wasn't good. And that gets into what I want to say here. Despite my differences with Donna Newman, I do agree with her particular version of permanent revolution. But that gets in the whole complication thing. And that, I should say that we need to prepare for, as Bundism is becoming popular again, for there to be long drawn-out arguments that won't be settled with just a couple people. There will have to be an ongoing conversation amongst Bundists. That's why one of the main goals still remains the idea of the Jewish International Bund in the Oblast. And that would be a brilliant place to have that, where all Bundist chapters and units can come over there, you know, and discuss the future of things. This will still be necessary even after the removal of Zionism. And I'm not speaking as an optimist. I'm no optimist. I am, if anything, a cynical realist. I just want to say that I'm not saying that I've done my part. I have more to do for this, but there won't be much more for me to do. And so these projects I'm putting out for this channel, I hope, will be for people's benefit. I'm working extremely hard on them. I'm also trying to keep up with the protests going on, and that's very difficult with lack of gas money, you know, to give to people to drive me, because yes, I don't drive, and there's a lot of reasons behind that that I'd not like to get into. My life is a very peculiar one. And but that's another thing right there, is like Jewish people find themselves in peculiar situations these days. I know I definitely do. This, what I'm going to show you is not conventional for documentaries typically, but I believe it's necessary. It's completely uncut. It's all 9 videos fused together of a playlist from Dr. Weizfeld's channel. The link to the playlist itself will be in the description. Nablus Palestine Night Raid, November 19th, 2011. You know, it's actually rather sad. Dr. Weizfeld was very optimistic back then, and I always hated the optimism, but, you know, I'm actually really nostalgic for that. He's in the war mentality right now, which is correct. The simple truth is, we are at war. The Zionist State has declared war on Jewish people by basically lumping us in with them. One thing that the Zionists are most afraid of is that the younger generations of Jewish people in both the United States and Canada are anti-Zionist. They've lost. They've, you know, like the previous video was pointing out, they've lost the narrative. And, you know, if America doesn't have Israel anymore to do what it can to manipulate the region, then America loses a great piece of the pie it once had, which is inevitable. But that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods. What happens in capitalist crisis is what? Fascism. And we see that. 2020 should have been enough of an awakening, but this was going on before 2020. Like, it's I don't know how many clips I have to put out here to get that point across, and maybe that point has been made. But it's just, we're in this surreal period, and it's getting pretty terrifying now. But anyway, this is titled Nablus Palestine Night Raid, November 19th, 2020. Sorry. I'm sorry about that. Nablus Palestine Night Raid, November 19th, 2011. I still stutter, I still skip on my words, but I'm not as frantic about it as I used to be, so please do enjoy this. It's going to be around 45 minutes, so if you have the patience for it, please watch it. If not, you can obviously fast forward up to, you know, what I have to say next in my conclusive, in how I will conclude this video. But anyway, I do hope you enjoy, and I hope you see that this is, by the way, 2011. So October 7th and all this shit that's being said, like, this is not, like, you get to see just how long this was going on. Yes, 2011, and Dr. Weizfeld is the one filming all of this. So, like, and this is not something you can just hear in the background. You're going to have to watch this to comprehend what you're seeing. And like I said, if not, if this doesn't suit you to see this, then you can just fast forward to when I speak again in this video and conclude. But anyway, I do highly suggest that you pay attention to this.
This is Balata refugee camp in Nablus, Palestine, the night of should be the 5th of October, 2011 right now. At the corner there's a tire burning, which is an attempt to stop the Zionist military from advancing further closer to the camp here. There's about 12 military jeeps that have entered into the area between the Balata camp here and the Alaska camp further down over there. Zoom in here. That's an attempt to block the roadway to the military jeeps coming in closer right now. The presence of the jeeps can be detected by their flashing lights and by the convoy of the lights as well. They had come down the roadway over there. I may be able to get a better view for you using a night vision feature here. I'll switch over now. Here it is. Yes, infrared turns green in this view. There's a bit better view there, in spite of the lights. There's a resident car coming in playing some music. I can see a Jeep at the end of the road over there. Try to get it in the frame here. Oh yes, there it is. Just moved on. It seems to have moved. No, it's still there. Just the red light is blinking now. So far I don't see any other Jeeps around. Although they're hidden now from the view by those tall buildings over there. It seems that the military come in front of the camp there, in front of that church over here, which houses the Jacob's well in the basement, which passes right in front of the Balata camp. That's like when the military was passing down this road, 2003, when the occupation was within the city and even within the camp itself along the Market Street. Let's see what that vehicle is doing over there. Oh, there seems to be some other activity. It's moving. Here it is. Trying to get a closer view of it to see if it's a military vehicle. Oh, it's hidden now. The original vehicle is still there blinking away. I hear something like a shot. Yeah, looks like a convoy. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Taxi driving by down below. Lots of activity. Second convoy coming from another road to a junction point there. I'll try to get closer, see what's going on. Yes, lots of vehicles. Certainly not normal activity for this time of night. A shot in the distance. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7, long vehicle. 8, 9, 10, another shot with an echo. Oh, approaching vehicle. There it is. Another shot. I see something over there. Another shot. Fire. truck of some kind, a flash of light. Yes, that was a grenade of some kind. That could have been a bulldozer. Yes, 2 more shots. Battery is giving out. I'll have to change it soon. I see something there. Yeah, sounds like a... looks like military vehicles passing. That was 3, 4, 5. Big one, 6, 7, 8. Big truck. Bigger truck. And 11. Definitely silhouettes of jeeps. It's just a car passing. Oh, yes. I can see some flashing lights over there. Yes. I'll take this opportunity to change the battery in just a moment. Okay, I'm back. I see some activity at the corner there. Try to get a... Yeah. Here it is. Switch over to infrared. Yes, there they are. Seems like a campaign of harassment around the refugee camps here. Now, where, one may ask, is the Palestinian Authority and its military? And their splendid military bases, and their splendid uniforms, and their splendid Kalashnikovs. Nowhere to be seen during the night around the refugee camps. That's the de facto condition of the occupation here at this time. Oh, this battery is giving out as well. I'm going to conserve energy. I'll be back. I see more activity. Yes. Let's see if I can get it for you. Yes, I saw the flash first, so I turned it on for you. So the distance is about 1 kilometer down there, maybe 2. No visible activity. Not from here. Sounds like an ambulance siren. Quiet for the moment. Usually after a few more seconds, something happens. Shot. There it is. I hear a loudspeaker coming from that direction. Hebrew. Yes, I can recognize that. Another ambulance. Shot to the right in the distance. A shot. Could very well be that a house is being occupied. The residents are being ordered to leave it, get out. While the house is occupied and used as a positioning place to overlook the rest of the neighborhood. I've seen that before in 2003. That's the direction towards the center of Nablus. Gas projectiles inside the camp. Here's the Shabab. Grouping to defend their homes. Smell of gas. Another projectile. low, aimed at the shabab. Shouting coming from down the street in the market area. There's gas. Right on the Market Street, a block away. Sound grenade. They're retreating. Military is advancing in this direction. Another gas projectile. Another. Oh yeah, that's gas. Oh, too strong. I have to close the window. Oh. Another. You can see the gas underneath the street light there. That's the mosque minaret. It wakes me up every morning at 4:30. That's just a reflection. The gas is still visible underneath the street lamp there. just above the park taxis. There's a young man who's just coming back from the market street.
Totalitarianism is here, and there's no point in pretending that it's not. And not just totalitarianism, but in most of these cases, and yes, most of these cases, outright fascism. Again, there's no point in denying it. Fascism is just a lot smarter than Adolf Hitler and Mussolini now. Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler are yesterday's news when it comes to this. Like the real fascism that's bigger, and it is fascism in the same vein, but it's the upgraded. The upgraded fascism is better at psyops. They've learned from things like COINTELPRO, the successes and failures of Project MKUltra and Project Monarch. Yes, these are things. Public information. I've always emphasized public information, which at least is more cherished among people who want to put out convincing videos. I am very grateful to Jason Unruh for all that he has done for the Bundist movement. When nobody else gave a shit, he did. I just needed the opportunity to show that it was all happening, what was going on, and he heard me. He didn't shrug me off, he listened, and I showed him a lot. I can't tell everybody what I showed him, and this is the thing. A lot of people come to me asking me, well, what this or that, asking questions that could harm people. But, like, one thing that I know about journalism, and this is one of the things that set me apart, by the way, from the martyred Bundists, is like I was the one that was really into journalism. I just wanted to be the Jewish newspaper man. I was naive and young, and I listened to Donna Newman, and I regret it. She conveniently has vanished now that her little, works or what her plans are didn't fall through. But, my plans didn't fall through either. And I'm pretty sure Dr. Weizfeld's plans didn't fall through quite the right way. But we resist and we persist. This presentation by Jason Unruh is extremely important. If anything in all of this video, please watch this. Because this is happening right now. What the people in Palestine are dealing with now is the kind of fascism that is, in fact, comparable to Nazis. And it should not be a surprise whenever any Jewish anti-Zionist tells people, hey, we're dealing with Nazis and in collaboration with Zionists, like I have tried to sound the alarm about. And there will be others other than me. I have no doubt of that. But for those of you who know, it's better to speak out ahead of time and rather not do it the way that I did it, just trusting that, stupid strategies are going to work. But anyway, this came out on November 15th, 2023, and it is very essential. This is what Palestinians have to deal with, and it will not end with Palestinians. I mean, this is tracing over to Jewish anti-Zionists. I've been dealing with some shit myself in certain public areas that I was once welcome in. So anyway, this came out on November 15th, 2023, and this, I strongly suggest, if anything, watch this one.
Have you ever been browsing the internet and accidentally come across something that certain authorities would consider to be illegal? Of course, because we all have. That is the very nature of the internet itself. There literally is no filter which stops you from seeing anything that is illegal. Now, yes, you can choose to not go to sites that blatantly do post illegal content, but the same cannot be said for social media. You largely can't control what it is that you see there. Sure, there's an algorithm, But if anything illegal matches that algorithm, it's going to be shown to you. And that's something that you can't control. That's something that you literally have no power to stop. You can control some of the subjects, but there is no perfect filter on there that stops any illegal content from coming into your view. Now, should you be arrested for involuntarily seeing something that certain authorities consider to be illegal? Now, most people would say no, but Israel says yes. This is called passive social media consumption, meaning you didn't ask to see it, but it still appears on your screen and you consume it. Now, this is very common. It happens constantly in all social media. You literally don't pick and choose all of what you see. Israel has decided to criminalize the involuntary viewing of media and, of course, are using it to persecute Arabs in the country. This Arab Israeli citizen is being arrested because she merely saw a post which the Israeli police allege is terrorist content. She didn't actually do anything. The police officer in this video is telling her that she has been accused of aiding and abetting terrorists and accusing her of conspiring to commit acts of violence and terrorism, and accuses her of being a member of a terrorist organization, according to a translation provided by a user on Reddit.
انت موقف استنى شوي زي انت موقفه في اتهام في نشر كلمات مديح تعاطف وتشجيع العمل الارهابي. لا دعم استنى شوي دعم مستحيل تعريض حيازه اعلانات تحريض تعرض على العنف والارهاب، الكشف عن الانتماء الى منظمه ارهابيه.
So exactly how is it legal to just arrest an Israeli citizen like this? Well, the Giznet on October 8 actually made changes to the counterterrorism law that increased and created punishments for consumption of terrorist publications. Meaning if you just see something that they consider terrorist or affiliated with terrorists in some way, you can receive up to a year in prison. The dystopic nature of this is palpable. One does not even need to actually watch the video. For Twitter, you only need to scroll past it for it to count as a view. Since you don't control what you see in the feed, it's literally involuntary. You can be arrested, charged, and sentenced to a year in prison for something not only did you not choose to do, but very likely you didn't even know you had done. This is particularly interesting considering in most countries, the social media site is responsible for taking down illegal content. If you happen to see it, it's not your fault because the company was supposed to remove it. This is also why the report button exists on every platform. Now, I don't think I need to tell you that this is primarily being used to criminalize Arabs inside the country, not the white European Ashkenazi types. Although some of them actually do get arrested and charged, they just happen to be the anti-war people. So you can kind of see how this is set up and only used to criminalize Arabs and anyone who opposes Israel's ongoing genocide of Palestine. But this is not unique. This is certainly not the only example. Remember Ahmed Tamimi? In 2017, she became famous for slapping an IDF soldier who shot her cousin in the head. After being released from prison, she became a kind of celebrity in the Palestinian resistance world. This time accused of inciting terrorism on her Instagram account. Her mother maintains that her account was hacked, which happens quite frequently. She is accused of posting the following message. We are waiting for you in all the West Bank cities from Hebron to Jenin. We will slaughter you, and you will say what Hitler did to you was a joke. We will drink your blood and eat your skulls. Come on. We are waiting for you. This is very clearly a case of techno-framing. This isn't even written how she speaks. This isn't like anything that she has ever posted on her Instagram before. And this does come as she says she was hacked, as she frequently is. But that is not being taken into account at all. She's just all of a sudden been arrested for allegedly trying to incite terrorism and is being locked up. But this is far from the only example. On October 8th, a fourth-year student at the Technion in Haifa, Banya Khatib, was arrested for allegedly making a terrorist social media post. The post featured a skillet with a shakshuka simmering on the stovetop. The eggs almost set with the caption, "We will soon be eating the victory shakshuka," and a Palestinian flag emoji. Afterwards, a group of Jewish students filed a complaint against her. They claimed she was showing support for Hamas. She was then arrested and held overnight. The police attempted to extend her detention by 6 days. At court, she explained that she had made the image because she had successfully made the meal that she had difficulty preparing. She testified that the image was for a group of friends who were going to taste her triumph in the kitchen. The judge decided that there was probable cause that she was supporting terrorism, so she was ordered to spend another day in prison. On appeal, she was released, given 5 days of house arrest, banned from ever using social media again, and was suspended from school. But it continues. According to the New Yorker, Omar, not his real name, is a university student. Like many Arab young people, he maintains a Facebook account that consists largely of religious verses. A few days after the October 7th attack, he posted a verse about being patient during hard times. A stranger left a comment accusing Omar of supporting Hamas. Omar blocked the stranger. Then a screenshot of the post showed up on a student WhatsApp chat of Omar's department. Someone wrote, "I'm not just locking him out of this group. I will make sure that he feels bad every time he comes near the university." Frightened, Omar filed a police report and then informed the university, sending a screenshot of his post to illustrate the absurdity of the incident. In response, the university sent him a letter informing him that he had been suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. An Israeli made a vague reference of a threat to Omar. So Omar was the one who got in trouble. I think it's pretty clear that these Nukisnet rules, the counterterrorism laws, are being used to criminalize Arabs all across the not a real country. And in fact, it's not just them, but in fact, anyone who posts any kind of an anti-war view, anyone who opposes what Israel is doing to Palestine, even if they are an Israeli citizen, even if they are Ashkenazi Jewish, they do get arrested and charged with allegedly supporting terrorism. That's right. Merely not supporting killing people in Palestine, not even really philosophically taking a side, but just saying the killing is wrong, is enough to get you arrested and charged, conspiring to aid and abet terrorism. And as the illegitimate state of Israel continues its downward spiral, continues its inhumane genocidal crusade against the Palestinians, the more people are going to begin challenging what they're doing. And that as a result, the Israeli government is going to have to resort to increasingly totalitarian, increasingly fascist measures in order to silence any dissent against their white supremacist settler colonial project. And how many people are going to get hurt because of this? People who aren't fighters, who aren't combatants, people who haven't shown any support for terrorism, just merely don't oppose the killing, or people, in the case of a few of these Arabs, who have done literally nothing at all. How many of them are going to get hurt? That question can only be answered by Israel itself, and how many war crimes it's going to continue to commit. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.